Alright, so I wanted to put together this quick tutorial on colored pencil only because a lot of you are using it as your main medium to add color to your cartoons. And it's not that you're doing a bad job, I think you guys are doing a really good job. However, there's a lot of little details that some people are unfamiliar with in regards to color pencils and how they can be used. So I'm hoping that this trick and these basically how-tos on how to create value with color pencils will be helpful to you guys when you create your cartoons this week. So I have here a quick sketch of a sphere. I figure that's the easiest thing to get my point across. And many of you may not be aware of this, but when you use complementary colors together, they actually help create a really rich shadow. Now, many of you might be aware of this. I've seen some of you use it. However, in regards to colored pencils, shadows are pretty easy to do in the sense of you add black or just a darker version of whatever color you're using, which is great. But to actually add some sort of a richness to the value, if you use the complement, it almost gives you like a second light source almost, or another color of light in the actual item. So here I'm doing a blue sphere, and I'm going to use orange as it is the complementary color. It's opposite in the color wheel. And the orange is actually going to bring the blue very dark, but it's also going to bring like this other rich color and value to the actual sphere, and you'll see what I mean. So a lot of you kind of just color basic, just fill it in, color it, which is great when you do your cartoons, but it needs some depth, and I've said that a couple of times to you guys in your critiques. That being said, I wanted to just kind of review how color pencils should be used. So if you see what I'm doing here, I'm building it up. I'm starting very light. I'm starting with some light colors and some medium colors, and I'm slowly adding the dark as I build it up. I'm also drawing lines and hatching in the shape or the direction of the object. So this is a sphere, so I'm using curved lines, and I'm changing the curve based on which side the sphere is on. This will help create the illusion of depth. Okay, I'm using the side of the color pencil as well as hatching and cross hatching just to fill in the areas and to give a smooth texture. Okay, as I build it up, I'm going to be using multiple blues, and then I'm going to layer in the complementary color. So I have like a base of an underlining light blue, and now I'm adding in my orange, and it's a medium orange. It's fairly light. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing too dark. Okay, I'll add darker later, but I'm very softly putting it on top of the blue areas that I want the shadow to be darker. And right now, yeah, it just looks like an orange and blue sphere, and at points it's actually going to turn green because of the yellow and the orange, and yellow and blue obviously make green, right? So that also adds like another level of color and richness to your drawings, and this is something that I think is valuable when using color pencil. It's something that you can't always get with other mediums. Okay, once I've laid in my light layer of orange, I'm going to go back on top now with some of the darker blues, and I'm going to layer it on top, pressing a little harder obviously than I was before. I'm not pressing too hard. It's like a kind of like a middle pressure, I guess you could say. However, if you notice some of the areas with the oranges, it's starting to get pretty dark, and it's pretty cool. And this will work for any complement, not just blue and orange. It'll work for yellow and purple, red and green, you know, whatever you need, use. And it's vice versa. So if I was doing an orange sphere and I was using the blue, I would just layer in the blue throughout the orange and have more orange than blue. In this scenario, I have more blue than orange. So I'm building it up. I want that core shadow to be rich, so I'm going to constantly be layering my blue and my orange in that area. The dark shadow, the darkest shadow, should be the cast shadow, which is on the floor there with the ball. So I'm going to continue to layer in the two colors, and you can see there's some green showing up too, but when I layer on the blue again, it just gets darker, and I think it works really well. As I continue to layer in these, and you watch this, I just want to point out a couple of things. If you're going to be inking this after, which is ideally what we're doing, right? Now, I would say that you don't it's not mandatory that you ink it if you do such a good job with the color pencil that it looks awesomely rendered. I'd be okay with it not being inked. That being said, also too, like if you just want to do an outline around the outside of it in ink and leave the inside just as really rendered colored pencil, and some of you even are doing that with watercolor and other things too in your artwork, I think that's great too. Okay, I'm going to wind up inking this after I layer all these in, only to show you what it will look like. Okay, I actually think the finish of this is good enough that maybe I would just put an ink outline on the outside and call it a day. But if you're planning on inking this, doing the color pencil before the ink has its advantages, but it also has some disadvantages. I think the advantage is that if you ink after you color pencil, you'll actually have a very rich black when you put it on top, because the ink is on top of the color pencil. Sometimes if you ink first, the wax of the color pencil, if you get on the black areas or wherever it is that you inked, then it tends to get a little dull because the wax is dulling it out. Now, the downside, so to avoid that, I should say, actually, to avoid that, you do the color pencil first and then you ink afterwards, right? So then you have that rich black. Now, if you do what I'm doing here, where you color pencil first and then put on the ink, it's great, you have a very rich black, right? But the downside is that the wax of the color pencil, especially when you're building up something like this over multiple colors so much, right? There's a lot of wax on the paper here. The wax will actually, the residue will go onto the pen, and there'll be points where the pen doesn't even draw because there's so much wax built up. You kind of have to wipe it off and go back at it. So that is a downside, and it can be tedious and annoying, and sometimes it's not as strong of a line because the wax is there. So there's really advantages and disadvantages to doing both methods, before color pencil before ink and ink before color pencil. It's really your preference. I think either way they always look great, but it's up to you. If you're curious as to what the color pencil looked like after you ink, the broccoli example that I did for the anthropomorphic project was ink first, then color pencil. In this scenario, obviously, we're doing color pencil, then ink. Okay. So I've layered in all my blues and my oranges. As you could see, it's getting very rich. And at the last step there, I took a black color pencil and I just added a little bit of black in there to add a really rich finish. Now, I could probably blend this with a blender and make it a little bit more smooth and say it's finished, but I wanted to show you guys what it would look like inked, so I'm going to ink it now, just so you could see. Now, like I said, this could be finished, you could hand it in as is, and I think it looks pretty good. In fact, if I knew I was going to be inking this totally, I probably wouldn't have done the cast shadow. I just would have done the cast shadow with ink instead of color pencil, just because I'm going to mainly wind up covering the whole thing. Okay. So here I'm taking one of the brush pens I have. If you have a Sharpie and a Micron, you can combine the two of them together to get a thick to thin line. You want to do that because the thicker area is away from the light, so it's more towards the bottom of the sphere, right? So you want to emphasize where the light is coming from with your ink. You've worked all this time and created this great shadow and value on the sphere. Why waste that illusion if you're not going to continue it with your inks and changing your line weight? So like I said, I realized this too as I was inking, that I probably should have just done the cast shadow in solid black. I think it would have looked better. And I'm adding just a little bit of the darker, the thicker blacks to the darker areas. And then I take my thin one and on top, I just add very thin lines here and there, not completely closing the whole sphere because I want the illusion that light is coming from there. So the thinner and the less line, the better. And then I quickly go over my core shadow with some cross hatching. To be fair, I actually think it looks really good without the ink. I think the ink kind of takes away from some of it. If I were to redo this, I probably would have just done the outline of the sphere, and I would have done the cast shadow as total ink instead of even bothering with the color pencil. And maybe the little dots up top where the glare is, but other than that, I probably wouldn't have done any of the cross hatching. I just think it takes away from all that great color that we just layered in. But if you are curious as to see what it looks like, this is what it looks like. And I did have some difficulty with the wax getting on the pen there towards the end. I hope this helps. I hope this maybe opens up some new ideas and new doors for you, new avenues for you to use color pencil. But take your time, and if you want to take this advice, great. If not, that's fine too. I mean, if you're using marker or watercolor, obviously this doesn't apply to you, but I figured it's information that is beneficial to anyone. All right, and obviously when you're done, you can erase your pencil like I'm doing. I hope that helped, guys, and I look forward to seeing your stuff this week.